Hey there, Richard Tubb here, and today we're talking about data migration for managed service providers or MSPs. Now, as a former MSP owner myself, I can speak from experience in saying that moving data from one system to another can be a pain and at times nothing short of an absolute nightmare. So today I've invited Michael Lawson, who's the founder of Movebot.io, to speak with us. Now, Movebot is a solution that helps MSPs to move data fast and simply and securely. So I'm looking forward to taking a look at this. Michael, great to speak with you.
Yeah, likewise, Richard. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure. How would you describe what Movebot does?
Oh, pretty much like the name describes.
It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, no. So Movebot is effectively a data migration or a data transfer tool, built really to make the process of migrating data seamless, and a lot easier than it is normally. And it goes a little bit further than that, in that you can use it to transfer data, to reorganize data, to clean up data, and whatnot in virtually any cloud environment that exists at the moment. And we also, just as a side note, do cover off emails and calendars and a few of the other nuances that generally go with a larger migration project. But yeah, as the name suggests, it's really all about moving data. That's sort of our bread and butter here.
Got it. Now, you and I spoke on my Tubb Talk podcast recently about your 15-year background in the MSP industry. So if anybody watching this wants to find out more about what led Michael to build Movebot, I'd encourage you, go and check out the podcast, and we'll include a link in the show notes as well. However, for today, I'd like to focus on the Movebot tool itself, the actual platform. So I guess, Michael, how would you differentiate what Movebot does from some of the traditional data migration tools, scripts, etc., that type of thing?
I guess what we do differently is a couple of things. One is we try to deal with all the nuances of a data move, right? So it's relatively straightforward to copy a couple of files from one platform to another. That's not really an issue. But if you're thinking about transferring hundreds of thousands of files, or even millions of files, it becomes quite complicated, and you tend to run into a lot of issues. And just for the simple reason that the internet is kind of a strange place and doesn't really perform and behave rationally most of the time. And so you've got a scale dynamic there, but also there are a lot of nuances between the different platforms that during a migration project you need to deal with. And again, if it's one or two files, it's really trivial. It's not an issue. But as soon as you get into any sort of volume, then it becomes quite challenging. And you need to look at things like limitations on the destination system, file name sanitization, this sort of stuff, and also, just as I alluded to before, the limitations around scale. So transferring tens of terabytes of data over a weekend can be quite a challenging thing with these cloud platforms, because they do really limit you. And so the idea with Movebot is to take all of those problems away and make it really easy to actually transfer that data. And hopefully, given that you as an MSP are in a position to be able to move data more frequently for your clients and sort of put the data where it actually needs to be, and remove this data sprawl. Because unfortunately, as companies go through different generations of cloud platforms, they tend to end up with data all over the place, and it's difficult to consolidate. It's difficult to sort of sort out and clean up and get the data into the right place so that it can actually be used. Movebot, our kind of mission, our technology is built to solve that issue.
To make life easier for easier for MSPs. Yeah. So
that's the idea.
We've talked about the products a little bit. Let's see the product now if we can. Can you share your screen so we can take a look at Movebot?
I can. This is generally speaking where a new user or an MSP will end up. And what we do in this case, and what I'll walk through, is we have projects. And projects are just basically a unit of work. I've gone and configured a couple of different projects here. And if we take this particular migration across the 3 projects that we're looking at, we've got effectively a company that is trying to consolidate into SharePoint. And there's a few components to that, especially for this company. So one is they have a lot of data in Dropbox, because at some point in time they use Dropbox. And Dropbox has still been their sort of main key repository for files and folders. And then they have, of course, mail and calendars. And these are currently sitting in Google. And so they want to get them across into Outlook. And then we have some team drives and whatnot sitting in Google as well. And again, we want to move them across. Generally speaking, when you're first starting with the tool, you would create a new project and then you would link a source and destination. And what I can actually do is just configure a very simple folder move, which gives you a really good overview as to how you would actually go about even a larger migration. I can do that now. So if we create a project, we give it a name. If I can spell, it's always harder when people are actually watching.
It is.
And now, so I have already created connections here. And there's some nuances with creating the connections to different platforms. We have really good documentation on it. And so it should be relatively straightforward. But for the sake of sort of keeping this short, I've added them.
Well, do you mind me interrupting briefly, Michael? Just ask about the platforms. We got an idea. We saw Dropbox. We saw SharePoint. What other platforms can MSPs expect to be supported? Oh, wow. A lot.
Yeah, we support everything. So, right, we kind of have a few different categories, right? So you have block storage, which is your S3, your Amazon files, right across to, Wasabi and GCS. And then, of course, we have your traditional cloud storage platforms. So Box, Dropbox, Ignite as well. And then Google Drive, Google Workspaces, SharePoint, of course, which is probably, to be honest, one of the more popular ones.
Yeah.
And of course, then you have file servers as well. So we have an agent which will support a Windows file server. It will also support an Apple file server or host. Cool. And you have your traditional hosted OneDrive and SharePoint. And then, of course, your mail stuff. So, Google Workspaces, Gmail, Office 365, Exchange, and IMAP as well. And we are fairly quickly building out support for other platforms there too, like Zoho Mail and a few of the others, which are popular in certain regions. Storage connections is something that is constantly changing. We're constantly adding to that ever-growing list.
That's a fairly comprehensive list already, though. I'm struggling personally to think of some others. How do you, if you come across an MSP who's got a platform that's not supported at the moment, do you take on board the suggestions? How quickly do you move on creating new connectors?
Really quickly in some cases. It really depends whether, how niche the storage the connection is, and whether we think other people have asked for it. And often what happens is that an MSP will ask for it, and you're the 10th or the 20th provider who has asked for it, and we go, right, okay, actually now we're going to do it. Now's the time. And we build in that support. And once we've decided to build in support, it happens really, really quite quickly. Generally something within sort of 3 weeks. Or even, if it's a relatively straightforward provider, then it can be even quicker than that.
Wow. So that's interesting. So I know there's going to be a lot of MSPs watching this, and we'll get back to the demo next. But probably what I'm hearing is, Michael and the team at Movebot are the data migration wizards. So if you've got a data migration coming up now, I would get in touch with them sooner rather than later, because if they can anticipate, this is going to be happening in the future, and it is something unusually you don't support, there's a good chance that it might be something that you can help them with anyway.
Oh, without a doubt. Like if you've got a customer who you think, in 3-6 months time might want to move some data or relocate some data, then just give us a yell, send a request through to support, or reach out to the guys And the more feedback we get from MSPs, the better view of the market we have. And as you said, like, we can anticipate sort of where you're going to be and get support built into the platform for you.
Marvelous.
It's all about like communication, right? And the support team or the customer success team here are extremely in tune with our engineering team. So they know what's going on. They know what we're sort of thinking about, and they have a really clear pathway to the engineering side of the business to kind of push stuff through.
Yeah,
makes sense. The obvious trade-off always with that is we do get a lot of requests, and it's we have to sort of prioritize and whatnot to maintain a really, really solid product. But we certainly listen, and we act when we agree with something, we act very, very quickly.
Excellent. So let's go back to the demo. Thank you for letting me pause there and ask that question. So what I tried to do, Michael, is predict what the MSPs are going to ask and ask the questions when they would. So forgive me for interrupting.
Oh, you're okay. Fair enough. I'll just have to figure out where I was now. I think so. What we were going to do is configure a very, very quick sort of move. And what I have is in Google Drive, which I already have configured. I have a team drive with a couple of files in it. So we'll just select Google Drive from the drop down here, and we're going to map it into SharePoint. So all we're doing as part of this process is actually creating the project. And then we have SharePoint over here, and we have a bunch of other options that are available to us at this point. So we could enable permissions. It starts to get complicated when you do that. So there's a lot of options and a lot of nuances around permissions. So we'll skip that part of the process. And then you've also got content options. So again, there are some flags here that you can play with. Generally, we really recommend you take the recommendations. And we're going to be changing this in the future so that it's a little bit more strict around, hey, this is going to work 99% of the time, and we'll hide things away. But there's a few options here that you can sort of toggle on and off. And again, I'm just going to take the recommendations and go straight to the sort of final step. Yeah, so here the final section is you have a few options around, always running deltas and forced approval and whatnot. And you also can choose a region. Yeah, so we offer fairly verbose granularity as far as where your data is actually going to be traversing during the move. There's San Francisco, London, Frankfurt, Sydney, a few regions there that you can choose from. But again, I would say 95% of MSPs just leave all of these options default and go straight to configuring mappings. And so we've got the project. There's nothing loaded in here. It's not going to do anything. And what we need to do first is actually add a transfer mapping. And in my case, from Google, we have this Cruising the World folder. I have aspirations to sail ridiculous places at some point in time.
Wow.
When my kids are old enough that they won't fall off, so we're going to copy that folder and drop it into a SharePoint site. If the internet will allow me to do that.
Now, this is interesting because we're going from two similar but also very different storage platforms here. So, typically Google Drive is, although you can use it in search mode, it is a more traditional file folder structure. SharePoint, not so much.
Yeah, SharePoint is quite different to Google Drive, without a doubt. And, normally what you would do to sort of get around this is you'd use the discovery scan functionality to actually map out and help you with the differences.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why that isn't. Oh, there we go. Sometimes SharePoint can be a bit slow. So
live demos. We set expectations at the start of this conversation, didn't we, Michael?
Oh, look, it's a dangerous game to play, mate. It's not a game I would normally play. But I've set up here a site in SharePoint called Personal Site.
Yeah.
I'm not a very creative person, so we're gonna dump the boat folder in there, and that's actually all we have to do, right? That's going to set up a transfer. You can see in our SharePoint, there's a bunch of other users, and this is one of our test environments, obviously. So there's all sorts of stuff there. But effectively, you're mapping from a folder or a shared drive or a user or a subfolder straight into another user, shared drive, subfolder, document library, or type. It's really the big difference with, or a big difference with Movebot is we treat everything like a file system. So you don't have to select, hey, I want to take this user and I want to map him to this user over here. You can actually say, I'd like to take this subfolder under this user and I want to put it in this team drive. And you're able to totally reorganize the content and how it's structured. And that's a really useful thing, because without it, it's quite difficult to go between disparate systems.
Yeah.
Because as you alluded to earlier, Google Drive is not SharePoint.
No.
It's very different, and they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So yeah, in a normal project, you'd end up with a bunch of these mappings, maybe sometimes thousands. And I'm going to, I'll launch that now.
So when you press the button to save it there, it didn't trigger the process. So you can set them up in advance. And then when you actually want to do the migration, then you kick it off.
Exactly.
Got it.
And it's not you don't have to fall into this trap of setting everything up in advance and then triggering it. So we could technically start this now, or we could just run a simulation. And then halfway through, we could add another transfer with a different folder. And that would be perfectly fine.
Okay.
Generally speaking, that's kind of what we recommend, right? You set up a project. Maybe if there's a few unknowns as far as the data and the source, you would do a full discovery. Otherwise, you do one mapping. You choose a folder which is really relatively inconsequential, map it and run it, and get a feel. Check that the data is in the right place in the destination, that it looks right, that there's no sort of unexpected folder mapping issues or anything like that. And then you start building out the real migration and adding these transfers. Yeah. And again, say we were to want to copy all the data on a particular user to another user, we just add another transfer, right? So we'd jump down, grab dev2, jump into SharePoint. Oh, it was faster that time.
Yeah, it's caught up.
Map that into dev2 and then go save. And then we could go more granular. So we could actually take say this accounting folder, and we could put that into dev2's account if we wanted.
Right.
Or we could drill in and stick it in a subfolder in dev2. So you get quite a bit of flexibility there. Oh,
what about Michael, transferring? It might be a silly question, but transferring across on the same platform, so SharePoint to SharePoint or Google Drive to Google Drive, maybe even within the same tenant, not necessarily tenant to tenant, which I know you do.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. Like both. So technically, and it is pretty common, to be honest. You could use Movebot to transfer from one document library into another, or even on like a file server. It's totally possible to do that. So I mean, Google Workspace has some good tools now where you can automatically sort of transfer data between team drives, which is great for MSPs. But you can also use Movebot to do that if need be. And for us, it doesn't matter, right? Like we're just about moving data. We'll take it to and from anywhere. And even though the name is Movebot, it's actually a copy operation.
Right.
It's a bit weird in that regard. Movebot's way more.
I totally understand. I think the other thing that strikes me about this, Michael, is I'm looking at it and looking and thinking you've already built in a lot of the behind the scenes to overcome some of the issues and the potential pitfalls. My gut feeling is once an MSP uses this, they're not going to want to use the native tools or anything else. They're going to say, look, even if it's a simple move, we're going to use Movebot because it eliminates a lot of the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I'm biased, right?
Of course.
That is really the case. And there are unfortunately a lot of nuances between the different platforms that make it quite complicated to do these moves. And so, our goal is really to just remove all of those from your subconscious entirely, and make it work. Google to SharePoint's a classic for those problems, and that Google Drive offers you the ability to do some fairly interesting things, right? So you could create 100 folders that have the same name in the same parent. It's actually pretty easy to do. And of course, SharePoint is simply not going to allow that. And so, we deal with all of those problems for you in a sane way, which is actually manageable, and most importantly, ensures that there is no data loss, right? Because the biggest obstacle with performing moves yourself, either using tools like rclone or actually physically trying to do it using sync agents, is that you will lose data and you will not know about it.
Yes.
And that for an MSP is an incredibly dangerous proposition, and a scary proposition, right? You're not going to know until maybe 6 months later when the customer goes to look for a file or a folder and realizes it's either not there or it's corrupt.
Yeah.
And we've invested an awful lot into preventing that as an eventuality. And really, we're not perfect, right? So there are situations that we cannot handle, but in those cases, we surface it.
Right, as opposed to it being hidden away. Because I speak from experience as well, Michael, as former MSP, where we've done migration projects that have been, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, that were really deeply technical and quite a feat to get the data from one platform to another. And we've done it. And then the client has complained a short time afterwards because there's been 1 or 2 files that have been missed out. And it's been like, they just don't see the technical engineering that goes on behind the scenes. They just see the results, which is as it should be.
Well, yeah, that's totally fair. Like it should be easy to move data from A to B. That's the thing. And unfortunately, it's not, because these platforms are engineered totally differently. They've chosen a different model around their offering, which gives them a distinct advantage. And it also gives an MSP an opportunity to when you're looking at where you should put data for your client, look at how they're operating and how they're working, and pick the platform that is going to best suit them. Don't always put them in SharePoint. Potentially some customers would be better served in something like Dropbox or Ignite, because they do really have distinct advantages. And hopefully, one of our goals with developing and building out Movebot, and by the way, we are constantly building it out, so it's by no means a stagnant product, is our goal is to kind of help facilitate those moves, and allow MSPs to actually choose where the data is going for their client and put it in the right place, as opposed to just always sticking it in SharePoint or leaving it on the file server and kind of forcing or pushing a customer to use a particular tool which is not necessarily right for the job. And we quite frequently see, especially in the larger organizations, they tend to pick the tool for the job, and different teams will use a different tool, which is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, cool. So where have we got up to? We went, as is often the case when you're talking to me, Michael, we went off piste here, but let's get back on track. So yeah,
sorry, I'm a talker.
Not at all. You and me both, my friend.
So we have a couple of jobs here, and one of them is just this cruising the world team drive in Google, going into a personal site in SharePoint. And so the first step now would generally be to run a scan, and a scan is going to give us a map of the data set. And so we'll trigger that off, and it's going to now launch some resources in our cloud environment, closest to the region which you've selected. I think I left it at San Francisco. This can take a minute, or can take a couple of minutes if we're extremely busy. But what it's actually doing is it's launching dedicated VMs for your project.
Oh,
and it's as soon as your project is finished, it will terminate those VMs. But what this means from an engineering perspective is that there's no resource contention, and we get around a lot of the limitations on the source and destination by doing this. It's also a major security advantage. That your migration is isolated. And the other thing I would say with that is that it's not a single machine. So we have some scaling logic and whatnot in the background that automatically moves resources around and tries to optimize for your migration. And so the system is going to stand up some boilerplate stuff, and then it's going to scale appropriately as it goes. And
let me ask a quick question. You mentioned virtual machines. It's almost preempted one of the questions I was going to ask, which what's the technical requirement to run Movebot? Obviously, we're looking at a cloud environment here, but do you also do like local hosting? Could you run it on virtual machine, or do you just literally log into the SaaS platform, the cloud platform, and Movebot does everything in the background for you?
Definitely the latter, Richard.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's ultimately, like, we want to remove complexity from our customers. And while there potentially are some advantages, especially around data sovereignty and security for self-hosting, this sort of software or this sort of system, we see the benefits around simplicity and scalability, and our ability to actually optimize the migrations for speed to just simply outweigh the disadvantages. And in this case, as you've seen, right, this is it. So what you're seeing is fully in the cloud here. There isn't a VM running somewhere where I've gone and spun that up. I haven't installed any software. All I've actually done is configured a project in the cloud and then connected previously to Google and to SharePoint via their APIs. So you don't need to spin anything up. It's all done for you, and that does mean that we look after all the hard pieces, and you don't get stung with things like egress costs and whatnot for data. You don't get stung for compute. And you're not left looking at an environment and wondering, okay, like, have I configured it right? When can I shut it down? And, is it going to take a month and I'm going to be left with these GCP costs? Yeah. It's just, we deal with all of that for you. And all you're left doing is configuring it as, and using it as you will, and paying for the data which is transferred.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Simplicity is key. MSP is very time poor for the most part. So I love the concept of just logging into a platform and it just works, which is actually rarer than it seems nowadays. So.
Yeah, it's a really core tenet. Like we've talked about it before. We're trying to make it really simple, and this is a key part of that. If I would just say, if you do have horrendous amounts of data, and we're talking, petabytes upwards sort of thing, we do offer a hosted solution to most of the time to get around some of the security constraints that larger organizations or enterprise clients have. But 99.9999999% of the time, you are just simply going to be better served with using our default offering. It's just faster. The quotas are much higher as well. We have direct links to some of the providers. We have really strong relationships with a few of them, and you just can't get that advantage by being self-hosted.
Yeah, makes sense. While we're waiting for that to spin up, or it's just about to by the looks of it, I was going to ask, we talked about traditional data, but what about structured data? Or we talked about traditional files. What about structured data? Is that something that's available now, in the future? Maybe email, things like that?
Yeah, so mate, email is available now, and actually I have a project. I have a project here that I set up for email migrations.
Okay.
Right. So, and actually I ran a couple of scans. So this is again Google into Outlook, and we've got 3 users here. Fairly untypical volumes, so quite low compared to what you'd normally see with emails. But it's exactly the same concept. So really, you just make the connection, you then add the transfer mappings, And here you can see the mailboxes.
Right.
Like Christian actually from our engineering team has created his own user here, but if we take Christian, we can then remap Christian into another user on the Outlook side, or the same user as well. It's exactly the same as with files, and you also get the same hierarchy. So take Dev2 for example. We could choose just to migrate or move his archived emails,
Right,
or just his inbox, or his archives, and something else, right? And so it doesn't have to be everything. It can literally just be certain components.
oh,
So I mean,
very cool. Yeah,
here's a bunch of folders here. So we could take the marketing folder inside Gmail and just pull that across. There is another quirk that is kind of cool with this as well. So technically, I could pull Dev2's emails out into S3 as files.
okay.
Yeah, and the neat thing about that is it's a really, really simple way to back up the data in a mailbox, and take a snapshot of it in a format that is actually usable, which is surprisingly unusual, right? So if we did that for this particular user in S3 or whatever buckets or storage we chose, we would have a hierarchy of folders and a whole bunch of EML files. So you could download a single email, or in the case of a few other platforms like Ignite, and I think SharePoint might do some pieces of it as well, you could actually pull the emails across into Ignite and then use Ignite's search functionality to actually look through those emails. And it's just a really simple way of archiving stuff. And of course, you can restore it as well.
Yeah. That's really fascinating to me. You said it was a quirk. That's a really powerful use case, though, isn't it? Because the number of times as an MSP when we've been called in by a client who has had somebody maybe leaving the organization with a ton of emails going back, that can be a bit of a pig, to move across. Do you put it in a single folder? Do you put it in a shared folder? What does it look like? I love the idea of just having it as files that can just be searched through, restored as an email if they need to, but otherwise just search through. Yeah.
We have architecturally, we've taken a different sort of approach with emails and calendars and contacts that, luckily for us has some cool, quirky side effects. And I think, as MSPs become more and more aware of that as a function of how Movebot operates as opposed to how other tools operate, we're going to see a lot of use cases around backups and snapshots and whatnot, which is quite a powerful thing, right? It's a good thing, definitely.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I will just zap back to my other project here because it has actually started scanning. It's probably just kicked off. Yeah, so it has literally just kicked off. And
so you can see the logs in real time as well as it goes along.
You can. Absolutely you can. So yeah, you see a few things. You see cumulative metrics as it's scanning. You see the status. You see which stage it's in. You see what objects it's actually operating on. There's performance insights as well. So if this was actually running for a longer period of time, we would see sort of how the APIs are performing. And you would be able to tell, hey, SharePoint is rate limiting us at the moment, or Google is. And, we collect a few metrics here that kind of give you a picture of what's happening and how it's performing, things like failure rates and whatnot as well. And I think at the moment, what it's actually doing is that first initial series of checks on the job. So it's checking things like size and whatnot. And it is it's a very, very small folder. So it'll probably just bounce and then we'll see it done in any second here. But yep, that's, you get a lot of visibility, right? Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but the trade-off with a tool like this is trying to find, okay, how can we showcase enough information that you understand the nuances of what is actually happening, versus sort of giving you a big green button that says migrate. So we kind of all want the green button until we realize, actually there's a few strange things here, and it's not as straightforward as that.
No, I think this will meet the needs of most of our technical audience, MSPs like myself and others who can be techie geeks, but at the same time just want stuff to work. So you want to know how it works, but you just want it to just work.
Yep, exactly. And
while we're waiting for that to go through as well, do you offer, or the team at Movebot, do you offer any advice or guidance on cleansing data prior to migration? Because I know that can be maybe something that comes up in discovery, but is there anything that MSPs can be doing to prepare for a migration?
Yeah, we offer a few things in that regard. So you have this this project discovery scan, which is actually free to run. So we only charge you for data which is moved. So what if there's some uncertainties around the data set and the source, which is quite typical, right? We would encourage you to connect to Movebot and to run a discovery scan.
Okay.
And what you're going to get there from that is a map, basically. And it looks a bit like this. My screen is a bit small, so there's some wrapping there. But what we can see here in our Dropbox test environment, we have actually 1.2 million files, which is a decent volume. It's only just under a terabyte of data, but you see that at the top. And then if we drill into it, we start to see where that data actually is.
Yeah.
So we have this massive user here, the admin at Couchdrop demo. She has the vast majority of the data. And then we've got this dev 2, and then we've got a couple of sort of team drives and other things. You can see here that we've already mapped a few of these transfers. So we have configured transfers for this folder as well. And we can see a few issues already. So the gray ones don't really matter. But anything that's not gray is something that you should take a brief look at.
Okay.
In this case, we've got 8 folders that have too many files for a single document library.
Right.
So if we click on that, we can actually see where they are. And as you can see in this case, so this test images folder has 200,000 objects. And that's a bit too big for SharePoint.
So you're looking at the limitations of the platform that you are migrating the data to and saying, hey, this isn't going to work. You need to do something with this before you hit the big green button.
That's the idea. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so we have these 2 folders or 2 team drives here. And so what you would do is actually jump into them and have a look and start to split the data out.
Right.
So if we go into it, we can see actually it's just these 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and alone they're actually a bit better, right? So rather than 200,000 or 290,000, we've got 100,000 here and 150,000 here. And so that's, even though it's sort of warning, it's kind of palatable for SharePoint. It's certainly better than 200.
Yeah.
So what we can do is add a transfer for that. And we can put that somewhere in SharePoint in isolation. And we could stick it into, say, for example, classified data, silly name, but it's test data, right? So we'll add that transfer. And then we will actually see, hey, under Kaggle datasets, there are some mappings which have already been done, and it's looking better already. Yeah. And so you start to go and build out your migration that way, taking into consideration the warnings that we've provided.
This is very cool, because having gone through this process before, and you've overlooked a gotcha, and maybe 25% of the data doesn't go through because it won't, file names too long, too many files, something like that. This is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's useful, and it's something. So this screen that we're looking at now, it's something that we are working on, and as we're going to sort of offer a few different views there. which will really make a difference to how you can map out your migration. So it's useful. It really does help, and we do encourage, unless you're just picking, sort of small folders or individual users that don't have a huge amount of data, it does pay to run this, even if it's just from a costing perspective.
Yeah,
because more often than not, you don't know how much data is actually in the source, and at the minimum, this will actually tell you. And then you can start sort of working with it and deciding, hey, this data we can get rid of, or this data we'll bring across. And there are a lot of verticals that you can take here. So, for example, if we take this food folder, we can jump across and find the largest files in that folder hierarchy. A second to crunch through.
Live demos, it happens.
Sometimes it can be a lot of data as well. I didn't look to see how many objects there were in there. I just have a quick. Oh, it's not many at all.
Not too bad.
Let's take that one. Largest files.
What about moving live data? Do users have to be logged off? I know that might sound like a obvious question, but you can do this in a live environment?
Yeah, you do. Pretty much always, to be honest. And yeah, so the way that you solve that problem is with deltas. So the next stage in this particular move is to, for this project, you would do a scan, which we've done for you, and then you're going to run the migration, and that's going to move all the data across, and then you're going to run deltas. And deltas are just going to pick up the changes in files. So if there's a file which has been added in the source or updated in the source, we will then move that across as part of that delta process. And so with that, there's not really any risk as far as having an active data set. It's perfectly okay to be active, and it's very difficult to get a company just to stop working.
I was about to say, this is music to my ears, Michael, because the amount of times where I've done data migrations and you're like, right, we need for you to stop doing it at this point. And even if it's a weekend or something, and you're giving up your time as the MSP out of hours, somebody from the client side will sneak in and be doing work. And it can be a real, if I had any hair to tear out nowadays, I would be tearing it out, but that can be a real pain. So this is interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's like you just can't operate like that today. Maybe 10 years ago, it's fine. You tell everyone to stop using the file server and, have a weekend off. Now you can't really tell when the data is live, when it's being worked on. And so it's really important that you move away from that sort of cutover period where, you find a long weekend where everyone's away on vacation. And try and move everyone across then. That's not the right approach, and it's something that we are really advocating against. And of course, long weekends are prime time for someone like me. So you're never going to find a long weekend where you can really get everyone off the platform.
Yeah, I agree. It's old school thinking, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And a lot of companies have data volumes which far exceed what is realistic to get across in a weekend. So you have to change your mentality there.
On this subject, while you're moving to that, forgive me again for interrupting, these questions come up, but are there any technical limits on the volumes of data that Movebot can work with?
No.
Wow.
The only limitations are what's baked into the platforms themselves.
Right.
And there are a few in that regard. So, for example, Google shared drives only allow you to have 400,000 objects in a particular team drive or shared drive. Ignite has some limitations around file size and whatnot. So I think you can't go over, I think it's around 100 gig, these sorts of things. But as far as Movebot is concerned, we don't have any limitations. And I think I might have told you in our last conversation, we had probably the biggest migration we've done to date was 1.2 petabytes out of Google Drive. And I mean, that's astronomical, right? That's a huge amount of data. The limiting factor in that case was actually Google Drive. So getting the data out fast enough from Google Drive. Movebot itself doesn't have any such limitations. And if you encounter issues with things like really large files and whatnot, you should reach out to support and we can take a look, because there technically should be no problems there.
Yeah. I think the lesson that the story that we're hearing here is, if you're an MSP dealing with data migrations, you really want Michael and the team at Movebot on your side here, because it's not just a great platform, but you've got, as you can hear, people who live and breathe data migrations in here. So thank you for sharing so much with us, Michael. Yeah,
and don't be afraid of talking to us. It's really a point of personal pride. Yes, we have a great product, and the product should do most of the heavy lifting for you, and it does. However, our support team is really world class, and we're not charging for support. We are here for MSPs, and we want to get you moving more data, right?
Yeah,
it's very core to our business to get you moving data more frequently, which means we have to make it easy, and we have to be there for when it doesn't go as planned.
Yes.
And that is something that we are very, very, very hard on, and really are there to support you and are available.
Cool. So we've got the scan here.
Yeah, it has actually finished, and as I said, it's a very small data set, but we can have a quick look and see what it's figured out. So it's a team drive, and we've got a bunch of files in it, boat pictures, ironically enough, and a Google document as well. And so this Google document wouldn't normally transfer across,
of course,
into SharePoint. So it's a document that we're going to have to convert. Everything else is just photos, and there have been no errors from what I can tell. We have detected that, hey, this Ultramir text document requires file conversion, but it's actually something that we're going to deal with automatically for you.
Wow! So you're actually going to do the conversion of the documents into
of course.
A different. Oh, okay, very cool.
Again, it's coming back to that. Hey, if you ultimately a success metric for us is if you can just click play and not have to do anything, right? Yeah. So we do a lot under the hood for you. We rename files, we convert them, we sanitize, we deduplicate. We do tell you what we're going to do, because it's so common in our world that MSPs understand the quirks and the limitations behind migrating, generally because they've been stung at some point in time, trying to do it themselves. And so they come to us and they're like, right, you've got to sanitize. How do you deal with this scenario? You have to be able to deal with that. And we go, yes, we do. And this is how you're going to see that play out in the platform. Yeah. In this case, actually, with this file, you can see it's going to be changed into a docx file. Yeah. And you've got the path where it's going to end up. And
very cool.
If I would just say one thing about dealing with errors here, this is kind of your go-to. Anything that is high severity and critical, you should look at.
Yeah.
But we try and reduce those to the bare minimum.
Got it.
Yeah. And so the next stage here would actually be to run this. Mm-hmm. And you can do that just by hitting basically launch migration. And away it goes. This time it'll be a bit faster because it's already got the VMs stood up, and they will be terminated automatically for probably another 30 minutes without inactivity. So it should actually kick in. And
while we're waiting for it to finish up here, How does the billing aspect for this to work? Obviously, there's no need to talk sort of pounds and pence or cents and dollars, but how is this product licensed?
So at the moment, it's licensed per gig.
Okay.
You basically pay for what you use, and for MSPs we have a couple of different payment models, and we're fully flexible given how they would work. So reach out to us if you have any questions around that. And with the MSP partner program, you get a pretty considerable discount on the sort of public data transfer rates. But the pricing is meant to be really simple. Yeah. We don't charge you differently for a team drive or a user, or we don't charge you differently for emails. It's really just a flat, you pay for the data transferred. And, this for us is kind of a bit of an incentive as well. Like I talked about speed being, we want to get you moving data really quickly. We also want to get you moving a lot of data, and we want it to be as fast as possible, so our costs are really low. So everything for us is around getting you moving more data as quickly as possible, and making it succeed. We don't charge you for failed files or failed migrations.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, because if you've not planned it out right, I was thinking, will you end up with a really big bill for something that's been planned poorly, but you don't charge for failed files?
No, we don't. We do occasionally have the case where people or MSPs, end up duplicating data or putting data in the wrong place, which, if you don't talk to us, you may get charged. You will get charged for that additional data that has been moved. But honestly, reach out to support. The team understands that these things happen, and we are extremely reasonable in that regard, because we get that, hey, you've got a customer on the other end who is having to foot the bill for that data transfer, and it's not in the right place. So talk to us, get in touch with the account manager here or with support, and we will work around those.
And you mentioned the partner program. What does it cost to become a partner?
Nothing.
Music to my ears. Tell us more.
It's not. Yeah, it's maybe not a traditional partner program in that regard. So, but you get all the benefits, I would say. So there's no cost to join the partner program at all. You need to be an MSP. That's sort of the prerequisite. It's not something that we offer to the public.
Yes,
and you get a fairly significant discount on the data rates that are in the platform. And we kind of gauge where you are in the spectrum as far as how much data you're going to move, and your data rate will reflect that. We also offer different billing, support for various scenarios, and premium support and access to our migration team. It's not something that we charge for. It's just our sort of promise to MSPs, and we try really hard to work closely with you to again enable you as a provider to move data to where it needs to be, basically for your clients.
Is there any benefit for MSPs watching this? Because I know I'm really impressed with the platform. I can see how if I was an MSP, I would want to build a relationship with you, Michael, and your team now before I need you, if that makes sense. So is there a benefit to MSPs reaching out to you now to come on as a partner? Do you offer, do you allow them to play with the product internally, maybe to get a feel for it and move stuff around?
Yeah, I would say do it sooner rather than later, and just in general, right? Like migrations can end up being something that's thought about at the last minute, and that's
exactly
not a great place to be generally. We'll of course support you in that case, but if you sign up for our partner program today, you're going to get access to the team here, and we're going to put you through. We're going to give you a bunch of training. We're going to talk to you. We're going to try and understand your migration projects and what you're doing with your group of customers, and work with you to get you on board and get you familiar with the tool. By default, if you register for Movebot, you get 250 gig of data, and you can run free scans.
Oh, wow,
for
cool.
Eternity. 250 gig of data sometimes is not enough to really test the product. So tell us and say, hey, Michael, or the team, we actually want to really put some data through you guys. We've got 5 terabytes we'd like to push through and see what happens. And we will do that for you at no cost. And really, like, we'll be happy about it.
Yeah. Very cool indeed.
We want to support you in using the tool, and the best way to do that is actually for you to play with the tool and understand it. And so then, when you get a customer who needs to move data, you are well positioned. You've got the tool, you know how to use it, and you can just press play and away you go.
Fabulous. And talking of which, we can see that this mini migration that we were talking about is now completed.
Yeah, it's a bit small, obviously. But if we have a look actually in the personal site and SharePoint, so I'll back up a little bit. First of all, there were no failures for a migration with 6 files. We'd kind of expect that, right?
We would hope so. Yeah.
You'd hope so. But this is what you need to look at. Just have a quick glance at errors and issues. If there were errors and issues, it would be red, and then you would drill in and have a look. And this is shown at a higher level as well. So you see a summary here. There's nothing running at the moment. There have been no issues, and you've got 1 migration or transfer complete with a very, very small volume of data. If we look in SharePoint, and if I can find the personal site, the SharePoint document library, and just so we have the files, we have the Ultramer document, and
which is now a docx file and was a Google Doc before, so very cool.
Exactly, it's now a docx. And if you're doing things like going Google to Google, we retain that, so you don't need to, you don't end up with a docx. And we kind of deal with try and make it as pleasant an experience as possible by nuances. But that's it. So the only other thing I would say there is what we could do now is run a delta. And if we were to run a delta, we would actually see that nothing has changed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we have enough time, Richard, but it's if we
it makes sense. Yeah.
Pick it off, and it will kick into gear. So during this process, it's going to run the scan again. And the scan in this context is looking at the source, which is Google. It's looking at the destination.
Right.
And it's trying to marry them up together. And anytime it can't, it assumes that, hey, something has changed there, and it needs to actually copy the file across.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, we actually have rate limiting on that tenant. And it actually, what it could be is because this is one of our test tenants, there might be one of the other team members running some serious testing.
Could be
across that. But yeah, we can see this is actually progressing pretty quickly. So it's finished the scan stage, and it will probably complete. Yeah, it's going to look at the directories. And if we jump across, I'm going to cheat and look at the Explorer, we can actually see the state of everything here. So if you look at these files...
Right. I mean, it does that in real time, does it? It updates that?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Very cool. Yeah.
It's quite a useful thing, to sort of, if you're watching a larger migration, you can kind of sanity check it as it goes. You don't have to wait until the end. And, as you can see there, all of these files have actually been marked to ignore because they're already up to date.
So when the migration scan completes, it'll say A-OK. But if there was any changes there, that any deltas that need moving across, it would say, I think this isn't the same on the source as it is on the destination, or vice versa. And so you need to run a migration across there to move the new changes across.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You can see here, this is the summary, right?
Yes,
so there
so
were
it's
no
got
files which were changed, and we found 6 unchanged files.
excellent.
And
So
again, no. Yeah.
we talked a lot during the migration, which I thank you for, Michael, for answering the questions as they came up as we went. But I think it's fairly clear for anybody to see this is a really powerful platform. It's really simple, although there's a lot of hard work goes in behind the scenes to make it simple for you as well. So if I was an MSP, I'd be looking at this sooner rather than later, because I don't know any MSP anywhere in the world who hasn't got clients that need to move data at some point there. So Michael, for anybody watching this who wants to find out a little bit more, what's the next step they should take? Where should they go to investigate more?
They can register for an account and have a play. Definitely recommend that. And at the same time, jump on our website, so movebot.io, and fill out our partner form. It's really just a first name, last name, or a company name, and your email address. And someone from our team will get in touch. And we're not pushy or anything. We are very, very easy to work with. And there's no commitment with our partner program. So if you're looking for a tool and think Movebot could actually help you as an MSP, definitely I would encourage you to reach out, or alternatively just sign up and have a play. And have a look around. Yeah.
Well, I think you and I talked in our podcast. We said, data migration, data transfer, not the sexiest or most exciting of subjects, but let's be honest here. Every MSP needs what you're doing here. So I thank you, publicly for putting this together, because as a former MSP myself, going back a little bit, but this can be a real pain. And what I'm seeing here, I wish this tool was around when I was doing data migrations back in the day, Michael, because it would have made life so much easier.
Yeah, it's good to hear. We are trying, and as I said, like it's not a static tool, so we are constantly tuning and improving it, and it's a never-ending moving target, trying to solve this problem. But we're committed to it, and certainly committed to helping MSPs move more data. That's our business.
And you were brave enough to do a live demo with me, which I also appreciate. But if you're watching this and you want to reach out to Michael, you want to have a closer look at Movebot, we'll include all of the links to, Michael's contact details, how to become a Movebot partner, everything else within the show notes, which should be below this video as well. So go and check them out. But Michael, thank you for staying up late across there, early in the morning for me in the UK, but I appreciate it. It's been really eye-opening.